former director and the artistic director of the International Association for Performing Arts and Research. So over to you, Aditi.
Thank you so much, Tanvi. Thank you. I think I am, just when you think that you have figured out technology, you haven't, because I think I am just trying to do something. Just give me a second here. If you can just help me out, can you just give a little bit of a recap to the other 3 sessions that we've had so far? And I'm going to join you exactly in.
Yes.
So we have a few friends who've joined us here on Zoom as well as on Facebook. So I'm just going to come right back.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be, just a quick recap of the last 3 sessions. Yesterday, the general idea has been to talk about, how do we look back and ahead? And I think this year in general has been, for all of us, in our own different ways, it has made us stop and, pause and reflect on everything that has been happening around us. It has also felt in a lot of ways suspended, in time. And we all have been dealing with it in our own ways and finding innovative practices of moving on with our own practice in our own individual lives. And the last 3 sessions have been discussions with various wonderful dancers from joining us from different countries. And in sharing their stories and learning about how they have been learning and coping. So yes, and Aditi, I think I see you again. Are we good?
Yes, we are. Thank you so much, Tanvi, for the last 2 days. Actually, earlier this afternoon and yesterday evening, we were really joined by some wonderful artists and dancers across the world. So if you've missed some of these sessions, you can actually catch them live on our Facebook. And I think we're good to go with today's session. And thank you so much, Tanvi, for that quick introduction. Hi, Avantika. Hello. I have with me some wonderful friends, colleagues, mentors, teachers, just practitioners across India and the world who've really, shaped a lot of our thoughts, are helping us grow and do the work that we want to do. And I want to quickly bring in the first panelist and the guest for this evening. Wonderful, wonderful performer, teacher. Avantika is a dance practitioner and an educator based in Mumbai. She studied at the London Contemporary Dance School and is currently pursuing the curriculum in motion offered by Jake Phillips, USA. She has, of course, created a few full-length works, Say What, Look Left, Turn Right, and some of the work that I have had the honor of being a part of the audience, especially Say What, which has really moved me a lot. And she also has a master's degree in English literature, and Avantika definitely brings in a lot of a different, how do you say it, a different dimension to her work by what she presents as a performer as well as a teacher. So Avantika, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. And as we move ahead and as we actually find ourselves exactly where we were last year, so when the pandemic hit us, we felt like it was too early to comment on anything because everything was just so new. 1 year down the line, how are we looking back and how are we looking ahead? So I would like to invite you to share a few of your year, a few reflections that you have from the past and something that probably, all of us can carry with ourselves. So over to you.
Thanks, Aditi. I think 2020 has been a special year for me in some ways, and also a very, very difficult year because I also delivered my first baby in 2019 in December. So, I was also sort of dealing and navigating with this sort of new body in 2020, along with suddenly along with kind of having a shared experience with everybody else of just being indoors, not being able to access, studio spaces, access shared experiences, etc. And looking back, I think the one biggest learning for me has been just this idea of flexibility and being able to adapt. Um, for example, just online teaching, for example, online teaching of dance. It's something that I always was a bit wary of when I'd hear of online dance programs or online classes, because in general, movement is just something that I feel is so visceral, and that experience of really being in a space with other moving bodies and being able to kind of share that journey together. It's something that we all were forced to do in some sense, and there has been a lot of learning that has come out of being a part of these classes and also teaching these classes, because it's helped me also sort of think, can I teach way with students? What do I need to change in the way that I'm receiving information? So certainly, I think the biggest takeaway for me has been how do we adapt to unforeseen circumstances. And I have been able to learn so much from my peers, and whose classes I've had also the opportunity to attend, which I wouldn't have. At the same time, there's also been some some great theater practitioners and dance companies that have been so generous in sharing their works online, things that we wouldn't be able to access. It's also, I think, in the pandemic has also really made the world a smaller place. We've been able to connect with teachers and connect with artists from all over the world, which which would have ordinarily probably been a bit harder. I think that for me, this question of where are we going to go from here and what are the connections that we are going to make once we go back into a post-pandemic world, something that I have been thinking a lot about is this idea of fatigue. Um, and I personally feel extremely fatigued. And I know that a lot of other people I speak with are also have the same feeling. And I wonder if we could use that feeling as a starting point, as a collective healing process. And how could we use that as a takeoff point to experience these just these feelings in the body that we're probably holding, and that from the past year, that hopefully we'll be able to really explore if we aren't already, or if explore collectively. So yeah, I think that's probably what I would look at if and when we go into a studio space with other dancers.
Absolutely. In fact, when you talk about fatigue, I was like, yes, that's what it is. That is what it is. And I have just been not able to pinpoint on that particular emotion word. So when you mention that, I feel a little more comforted, because I'm like, okay, maybe this is what it is, and maybe we'll deal with it when and whenever we can. Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing that, Avantika. And I did not mention the little one earlier because I wasn't sure if you wanted to talk about it, but congratulations. And I'm pretty sure it's a whole new
Thank
world,
you.
especially as a mover, to now have a changed body and to also be nurturing a little one while you explore your practice. So thank you for sharing that. And I will come back to you with a few more, maybe just questions or just discussion. And I'm going to now bring in another guest who's joined us. And somebody I have looked up to since I probably started my dance journey way back. And I'm going to bring in Vaibhav sir, Vaibhav Arekar, who obviously doesn't need any introduction. He is, by any doubt, one of the leading Bharatanatyam artists of India, someone who has traveled, performed, taught extensively, not just a wonderful teacher, but also a wonderful human being, a mentor that I know a lot of dancers go to time and again. He has he's traveled across the globe with a lot of his established works, choreography that is inspired by modernity within the classical template. I have often seen him perform now for various years now, and I've always been in awe of how he does that so effortlessly. But I'm sure it's been a tremendous journey. Vaibhav sir, thank you so much for joining us today, and I would like to welcome you for today's conference. One of the reasons why we wanted to sort of involve people from different backgrounds, different spheres, within India, abroad, different dance styles, was to just see how we can draw parallels, not really comparing narratives, but just learning from experiences. So it is such an honor to actually have you. And I'm going to hand it over to you now to share a little bit of how you look back at this year and what is it that you would like to share with all of us.
Namaskar to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here. I know it's a moment of sharing. It's been the whole year of sharing, of facing reality. To me, this year, I don't know what can I call this year. It's like many experience of over the years has been compressed in 1 year. It's been a year of turmoil. It's been a year of loneliness, solitude, hopelessness, but hope. There's a fight for positivity, but there's a compelling feeling of falling down. There are many, many feelings that keep coming back. And I have been experiencing this. Of course, I'll speak only from my perspective of how I have lived this year. It's been a tough year, to be very honest. Tough not because I didn't have performances as such, but the whole momentum just stops. 2020 began with a lot of hope. We had fantastic performances, tours abroad lined up, almost 3-4 countries lined up, new works happening, performances in India, and suddenly there's a pause. Initially, the pause was that you thought it's going to be, it will be released after some time. So my April, to be very honest, March and April, I lived quite okay. For one, I was dealing with a kind of little health issue, which in fact was affecting my dance. So when my tours got cancelled, in a way, I thought that was what was to happen. I didn't have problems because I thought I'll recover. So April and May went quite okay for me. And also, I think we were in a state of denial at that point of time. We were still not accepting what was happening, or we didn't know the seriousness of what was happening at that point of time. So April, May, I enjoyed, to be very honest, in spite of what was happening around. I'm ashamed to say that, but yet that is the truth of my life. That I was cocooned in my life. I was cooking, sitting, and I think my body was tired. I've been dancing for over 30 years, and the body was speaking at some point. And you don't give it respite, you're just pushing it. So I just took it. I slept, ate, whatever I've denied myself for many years, looking at how much calories the intake goes in. I said, leave it, forget. So I did all of that. In June, I realized that this has come to stay. It hits you. I wasn't taking classes. I told my dancers, you're free to do whatever you want to. This is your vacation. Just go. We're not going to meet. I practically live with my dancers. We live together almost through the year. But then in May, June, I thought that is not going to help them, because if I lose hope, what is going to happen to these young dancers? So I started a class with them, mentoring only my dancers. Otherwise, I don't have classes. But through that year, I have not been very well. Somehow the other issues that were around me was affecting me for sure. You can talk of migration, of poverty, of people not having food. And here I'm in this, I have the luxury of at least having food. I had work. I can't say I didn't have work. I cannot say I didn't earn in that session and those months. So in a way, I was happy, but there's something around me which wasn't giving me those vibes. Initially, I thought I'm going to read a lot, do a lot of work, creative work, introspect. Nothing of that happened. I don't know if you ask me, what did you do in those months? I'm wondering, what did I do in those months? Except for take classes. And I wasn't well at some point. 2-3 months went in that, losing stamina, all that. I just kept going. Dance was good. And I find when I start practicing, I slip into this meditative mode, which makes me calm. So that helped me even when I'm teaching with my students. But yet nothing creative happened. I did some 2 performances. 2 online performances in-house, typically. When Insta Live started off, I jumped and I said, let me try what it is. And I realized I shouldn't be doing that. It's not for me. So I did 2 performances. I stopped all that. I denied other performances because I thought I can't go out. I'm dancing in my drawing room and imagine Mumbai matchbox houses.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly I go into another space of dance and record it. So I refused to do 2 performances. Finally, I agreed in November to take up a performance and shoot it well. And I revisited a work called Venugan, a dance theatre work. I wasn't looking at classical dance somehow. I don't know why. I don't have an answer to that. But I wasn't looking at a traditional Bharatanatyam performance. So I thought I'll visit what I've been doing many years back. So I went to this piece, which I had premiered 2 years back. And I realized when I was into the piece, experiencing the piece, trying to revisit with a friend who was directing, Sushant, who was helping me out, open up the work. A lot of these insecurities, all these pains started coming and flowing into the work. And now when I look back, November, December was I went to this catharsis, the process of catharsis, everything went out into the work. And somehow the work turned out well. We started moving out. We performed at NCPA. We performed in Bhopal. So suddenly the world was kind of the semblance of the earlier worlds came in. I met my dancers in December, started working out with them. So we had these sessions. And then, of course, there's a pause again. And there's a dead pause again, I suppose. We don't know when it's going to be released. Where are we going to go? But coming from that, the only thing that is there right now also I'm facing it, but I'm prepared. I know I need to edit my expectations, facing the reality that is in front of me. So I shouldn't be having expectations. So I'm trying to live what is. I know this is a biodance of life. What is happening has to happen. I think it's only the humans who have a problem with what's happening because we see it as chaos. Probably nothing else in the universe is looking at us, and this is a chaos. The virus is happy doing what it has to because that has been ordered to do by this principle up there. But it's pain around, so you can't deny it. And I am, so for one, I am, of course, creating a work for myself, thinking on it and agree for a shoot to do another work and working with young dancers now. I didn't teach through the year, not much, but I've started mentoring a mentoring program for a year-long program with young dancers and also new work with dancers whom I've appreciated, whom I've liked through the years and who come from different parts of the country. And we're trying to do a collective choreographic work. And nothing, it should be Bharatanatyam, of course, but we're trying to find different voices of women from across poems, across paintings, across cultures, but it's with them. So I think that will keep me going because it's finally those young people. Through the year, I should give the credit. I started those classes thinking I'm going to give them something that I keep them going. And by half those classes, by August, September, I said, should we close them, And I realized I didn't want to close it, though I was asking them, because they were my ray of hope. They had positive energies. They were living because for them, that's how life is.
Yeah.
So that way, dancers kept me going. I did workshops, I did lecture demonstrations, I did talks. All that has been going on, fortunately. But fortunately, I didn't go in depression. I had a lot of emotional upheavals. It was a roller coaster ride. Every time you fall down, and riding up is difficult. But you come down. So that's been a year. I think I've never experienced something like this in my entire 50 years. It's suddenly everything here at this point of time. Wow. And I'm waiting for something best to happen. I feel something good is going to come up out after this. Even for performance in Bharatanatyam. People have been moved, young dancers are moved. So we will have to question where do we go from here?
Yes.
So I think I stand at that point. Right
wow. Now. Thank you so much for sharing that because, two things I actually wanted to say. One is I remember when you also performed in Pune and I wanted to come and watch your show. And there was a lot of talk about whether the audience will come, are people going to return back to the theaters and all of that. And even before I could book my ticket, I saw an update saying it was sold out. And that made me so sad, but also so happy because I was like, wow, which means that if we reach out, people will reach back to us. So it's not really the end of it, for performances or artists and all of it. So that gives me a lot of hope. And secondly, I think I'm going to come back to what you mentioned towards the end, which is the collective choreographic work, which is also It's rare to hear a classical dancer, a senior dancer speak about this, and I think it's beautiful. So
Yeah, I'll
I think I'm
share
going to
it.
come back to you and talk a little bit more about that. So I'm going to ask you to just hold on, and I'm going to bring in Brandy right now. Brandy has joined us from Canada, and Brandy is actually someone who I met just before the lockdown hit us last year in March, and I had the honor of training with Venu Guruji in Kerala, and Brandy and I connected there. We were workshopping together, and Brandy, of course, knows Kerala a lot more than me and a lot better than me, because I think she belongs there, and she's been shifting through India and Canada for the last almost 18 years now. Brandy is a contemporary dancer, creates contemporary performances with an artistic practice informed by dance, martial arts, circus, and theater. Her works have been produced and performed in Canada, Europe, India, the Arctic, South Africa, US, in theaters, urban environments, festivals, museums, art galleries, iconic landscapes. And by this, I think when we talk to Brandy, we're going to see a few visuals of her work, and she's going to be explaining and taking us through that journey a lot better. She's an active performer, choreographer, collaborator, curator, and currently the artistic director of Anandam Dance Theatre. Brandy, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us here today. And good morning to you.
Morning, Aditi. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here. It's nice to be in such a lovely group. Thank you so much for the invitation. Yeah, I think I'm just going to work through the questions that you sent as just places of thought.
For sure.
And also to speak a little bit like in two ways. One, I'm a practicing artist and a dancer and a choreographer. And two, I'm also in charge of an organization which has a relationship to artists and the public. And those are sort of two different things that have been part of moving through this pandemic moment. And also to preface it with, I am in Canada, I'm based in Toronto, even though in the before times, I definitely worked all over the world. And just to give the context that Canada is a country that has a system of funding for the arts, which is a rare, more and more rare. So we have that kind of structure. And often the work that I create or make with people takes place in theaters, but also a lot in public space and for large groups of people. So this pandemic moment, when we can't gather, when we are nervous about bodies, when we don't have free access to moving in public space, has really made me think quite a lot about what that practice looks like. So in just thinking about the experience of the past year, I was actually had the lovely experience the last time I was with a group of people making and thinking. I was with you, Aditi. We were in Kerala. It was really quite a beautiful moment. And then I found myself, I was headed to Chennai to go to the March Dancers Festival. And then ended up grounded in India for 6 months. I had come for 5 weeks to do this work. And then I was headed back to Canada to open a show, to tour a show, to, like everyone, had a schedule that was full of performances and projects. And so I was just grounded in Kerala. I was at my teacher's house in Kaligat, which was safe and fine, and also was a space like we had a giant terrace. So I was just doing class every day, or I had a studio space, and obviously in the early parts, just making sure everyone is okay, friends and colleagues in India, friends and colleagues and family in Canada, because at that time we didn't really know what was happening. And eventually made my way back to Toronto, I think after, like in August. Our experience here is theaters have been closed for a year. We have not reopened performing spaces at all. Anandam, my organization, has a venue that is a small theater space and also a rehearsal space. So it's been closed to the public, but open to company activities in times when we can gather. So for me, it was just super clear, even coming back to a small theater space, like to feel that space is a material. It's not just a resource.
Right.
Space is actually a material that we're working with dance. Like even just, say again, Aditi?
Can I bring in the images that you'd like to share at this point? Or you let me know whenever you want.
Okay, I mean, you can, if you want, you can just run them as a little, they're more just for context of like what the work may look like or different kinds of work. But for me, this period has really been clear about it's a time of practice. It's a time of shared resources, of being in community, right? So it becomes clear like what systems are working and what systems are not working. It becomes clear who has resources and who doesn't. So those are the things that have been really sitting with me. I've been thinking that like this idea of liveness isn't a genre. It's an actual material that we work with. It's necessary. That audiences are necessary. There is something that's happening in that space between us that's very tangible and important to what we do. I've been enjoying the slowness of the moment. I always work with slowness in my choreography, in my approach to space or audiences. But here we have like a period of deeply enforced slowness. I've been noticing the incredible amount of increase of labor on artists, exactly to adapt, to continually, to think of a live performance is completely different than to think of an online performance, is completely different than to think of a film, right? So there's just a lot more labor when we think about our work at this moment. I think about this term digital pivot, which has been very popular, and where things like that show up in a system like Canada, where we have funding resources. We were just thinking about what a pivot means as a physical movement in space. And if you actually do it, you're actually just staying in the same place and you're switching directions, right? So some of the questions I hold, at least in Canada and for international structures, is we're maybe not actually doing the work on the kinds of systems we say we are if those that have the resources are still centered and just kind of shifting their direction. And I've also thought a lot about whether people want to call it the digital platform or the digital sphere, or what happens when we take live works and make them into reproducible mediums like film. So the internet has a long history of being shaped and developed by communities of color, queer and trans communities, women, right? So entering that space, understanding that is not just a space of commerce, it's a space that has a history, that digital art has a history, that media arts and cinema have lineages. So I don't take for granted that I'm good at those things or that I can just sort of patch those things. I think the ability to really allow ourselves to have a different sense of, or a different possibility to think about new aesthetics, to think about different languages, to think about what our work means as we shift mediums has been really, really important to me. And the images that I'm just sharing really are just for context about the different spaces that Anandam creates work with, the different sort of array of artists we work with, public space, galleries, some video work. There, just to give a context. When I think about kind of innovative practices, sort of following or these moments that might be beneficial or exciting in this pandemic, it's been a lovely place to engage in an international community and dialogue. Suddenly people have time or people are available in a different way. And we've been working fairly consistently on a new commission from actually an Indian choreographer based in Chennai named Padmini Chetur. So we've commissioned Padmini to create a work on Anandam artists who are in Toronto in order to have a different approach to what international collaboration looks like. So not just having an artist come and drop their work in and, you know, business as usual, but to really actually say, like, how do we learn from each other? How do we chart different relationships that aren't just this sort of sectorial business buying and selling of art? How do we have aesthetic transmission? And how does the work of, as we create international relationships, how does it actually reside and stay and impact a place, as opposed to just being something that you go and see? So in moments when we've been able to gather by public health standards, because we have a studio, we've been continuing to work with Padmini, who joins us on Zoom, but the dancers at times have been able to gather in the studio safely. And with the help of a rehearsal director, it's actually been quite incredible about what we've been able to accomplish. And I think only because the dancers could be in the room together. And that's just been quite lovely, and also a reminder of like how long it actually takes to make dance. I think when we're business as usual, we can forget that it's an incredible amount of time and thinking and practice and rethinking to make any piece of art. So that's been actually really lovely to come back to that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for that. And thank you for sharing the visuals, because that really does put a lot of things in perspective. And it's just so nice to see the different spaces that you have explored through your work and the possibilities that have been created. And we'll you know, sort of come back to that. And it'll be lovely to, you know, also hear about the project that you're working on with Padmini and the kind of collaborations that are shaping up. So thank you, Brandy. I'm going to come back to you and everybody who's been with us today. Just when we bring in Ronita, who's our fourth and a wonderful panelist artist from Bangalore, a very dear friend, and also one of the, if I may say, a strongest, one of the youngest contemporary voices in the country. Ronita is an award-winning choreographer and a performer. She's an independent contemporary dance teacher and artist for over 12 years now. She was a part of the Atakalari dance repertoire from about 2009 to 16, and right now she works as an independent creator. She's won the Best Performer Award in PEGTA 2016 for her work Who, which won the funding for the Bench Project 2017 and has toured cities in the UK. She's also traveled extensively across India and has been an artist in residence in many countries like Australia, Japan, UK, South Korea, and a lot more. So welcome, Ronita. Thank you so much for joining us today. And just as we talk, I know there are talks of Bangalore going into lockdown. We are already in Pune. We've been in our homes for the last few weeks now. So I know the situation is really grim all across, but amidst all of this, what we are trying to do is finding space for each other, holding on to each other, and just learning and growing. So thank you. I'm going to give it to you now, and I'm going to ask you to share a little bit about your experiences, your reflections.
Hi, Gaditi. Thank you so much for inviting me for this talk. And thank you to everyone who just spoke before me. I was like, wow, mind blown by what's happening. And It's great to hear everyone share their experience, the four of us. And thank you everyone who's joined us for this talk. It's nice to have you guys hear us. And I'm waiting for the questions after this. Yeah, 2020 has been a tough year, but having said that, it also was a great learning year. And when we choose dance, we already choose an alternative career option. It's not a usual job that everyone's doing. When you choose dance as a profession, you're already living an alternative reality. And so whatever challenges are thrown at us, we are kind of always navigating around it, working around it, working towards it, and to see what takes us beyond where we are at the present moment. And so it's interesting because it challenges us as artists, and this year has been challenging as well, the last year as well, as artists, to find a voice and to find a living amidst all this pandemic situation. And I started teaching online immediately because there was the need to pay for my rent and buy food for myself, and the basic needs, when they come into place, your brain already starts working on how do we earn the money, how do we sustain ourselves, how do we live as live every day, so the moment this lockdown was announced all over India, the immediate reaction was, now how do we sustain us. And so I immediately started teaching online, and since then it's been almost now a year and few months now that I've been teaching different levels of dance classes. Sorry, it's the time for azan, so there is a background. Yeah.
Really clear, so you can just continue.
Yeah. As long as I'm audible, it's fine.
Yes.
Yeah. So, looking back to where we were last year, the news, the situation we were in, it was all very explosive. It was out of the blue. We didn't know what to do, and the immediate reaction was to replace it with something which we can do. And what we could do is put a computer in our rooms and move with how much ever space we have in our rooms, and as dancers we are always looking to move. As artists, as performers, the one thing that we want to do for sure is dance. So it was interesting because there were a lot of inquiries around the classes, and it was just pure joy to see people on the screen. And thanks to the virtual world, thanks to technology, thanks to this global digital world that we are living in, that we can connect to different people from different parts of the world, and everyone's accessible for everything. And it was just nice to see human bodies even on the screen, and there was a great moment of connection for me when I was able to do that. And so I used to actually, every day I would wait for my online classes to start, because that was the time I would see a few faces and I would move with them, even if it was virtual, And having said that, my students, the ones who joined, they were also brilliant. We were sharing stories about being in lockdown, about problems, about happinesses. A lot of people were also happy that, in March, a lot of people were, okay, great, we have some time to ourselves. So it was also a great time to share very authentic spaces, and as a teacher, I was able to also tap into a lot of the feelings that people were going through at that point of time. And also one very interesting thing happened. A lot of dancers, or a lot of people who were a bit shy to come to dance classes, they started appearing in the classes, and they requested me to keep their videos off and yet move. And I think that was a brilliant feeling, to have people who are a bit timid and a bit resistant to movement come up and come to the classes and move and dance and share. And this was great. This was sheer joy to have them come and move with me. Besides this, I also performed online on online platforms. I was working with Gabi Davis. She's from Malta. She's right now in this talk. And we created a piece together over Zoom, and we performed for the Sanskar Online Festival. And then I did a piece called Amorphous, which I was devising in 2018 with Priyanshi, and it is a dance into film project. And we started before the pandemic, and we did a few shows, a work in progress. And then the pandemic was called, and post that we tried to make it digital, and we actually were looking for ways to give a perspective to the piece. And the moment this virtual kind of performance platform opened up, we were having fun, because we had like put several devices in my room and giving different angles to the piece and perspective. And so we had great fun playing with the idea of perspectives in terms of digital performance. So that was great also, and it was only possible because we were locked down. Otherwise, as performers, we are always looking for studio space or site-specific work, or no one really thinks, let's sit at home and make this work, you know, and then we were urged to. So yes, so looking back, I would say, even if there was a lot of exhaustion and a lot of expectations and a lot of what next, there was also a lot of learning and new ways of creating. Like you said, there was a lot of creative reimagination, and that was great. And what is coming in future, I'm very curious to know. I still don't know, I'm still exploring. And it's going to be a year where now we know what the pandemic is like, and now we are into second wave, so we are entering into a space which we know and we don't know. So I think it's an in-between space, it's a transitional phase, and I think there is a lot of curiosity, there is a lot of excitement actually to see what comes up. I'm also working on a Zoom performance, which I've never done before, like a short performance by my students, and I'm creating it right now with them on Zoom, and I'm having a lot of fun. I've called it Inertia, and it's fun because I've never created online. Like you see 18 screens on your computer, and it's wow. I can't even explain it, how it is, the feeling.
That's a different, I think that's just imagining things completely differently, and also visualizing them turn into, you know, a lot more. Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. And yes, like you said, that, you know, we all had to do what we had to do when it hit us. So there's really no, I mean, there's been a lot of criticism and a lot of dancers and having been pro and against, and
Exactly.
ye karna hai, this has to be done, that has to be done. But I think for us right now, it's more like whatever works for you, whatever works for your mental, emotional, financial safety.
Exactly.
So thank you so much, John. And I would like to invite Brandy and Vaibhav and Avantika back, and I think this is a good time to just open up the conversation. We've heard all four of them, and all four of them come from different spaces, different perspectives. All of them teachers, curators, directors, managers, and also like trying to make things work, you know, with whatever. So any thoughts? I would like to open this up to all four of you. If you want to share anything, if you want to reflect on each other's processes, and anything that you want to mention that has stayed with you, you know, whatever was mentioned when anyone was speaking. So no, still thinking.
Processing it.
Yeah.
I think the last 2 days has just been about processing a lot. Like last night when we ended the first session, the second session of the day, we were all just like, there was this silence that just was, you know, and that is so required also.
Yeah, but I think what she said, what Avandika said, Ronita said, about survival, I think that's important. You know? Like a lot of dancers, I mean, I was watching classical dancers dancing in their rooms and in their bedrooms. For many people, it wasn't a good sight. But I personally feel if it kept them sane, if it kept you going this pandemic, young dancing, what's wrong? Because it's dance. If on stage I can ignore what is around, why can't I just watch dance? And that was a calling at that point of time. Now we are fatigued. Now we, of course, I don't want to watch it. But I'm watching a lot of dance films. They're making some fantastic films. You know, I can't even think that 2 minutes, 3 minutes films are beautifully done by young dancers. I got a chance to watch a lot of young dancers this point of time, which otherwise I wouldn't have watched them. And also study, attend lectures.
Yeah, it's also become slightly more accessible to just reach out, to for me to be able to sit in probably India and Pune and reach out to Avantika in Mumbai, or you in Mumbai, or Ronita in Bangalore, or even Brandy in Canada for that matter. So suddenly all the time zones, and you're calculating time according to where you are and where you'd like to reach, and it's also breaking that space, the
Yeah.
space of time and all of that. So I think I have a question for all four of you, and anyone would, I'm going to open it up to uh, anyone who'd like to answer. So how has your perception of space changed in regards to the performance? And this was something that has come in even yesterday, where there was a lot of talk about now performance becoming secondary. So sort of just, so dance is no longer just performance, and it was also a little unfair to think of it like that. It's like suddenly the whole rush to create, go, travel, perform, tada tada tada, but suddenly this whole other universe of taking things in, of learning, of relearning, reimagining, dealing with technology, dealing with conversation. How has this changed for you? And in that perspective, how do you perceive space now? How has that changed for you? Like, whether it would mean you getting into, like, if I am used to working in prosceniums, if that would mean that breaking that space and coming into an intimate space which only allows 10 to 15 people to actually be with me, or like Ronita mentioned, creating a whole new performance across screens. So that is defining a space in a completely different dimension. um, so how are you looking at that? Anybody who would like to come in?
I would like to say already. Again, there is Azan
Yeah,
supporting me at the back. But I feel like when you're teaching online, you're already performing for the students. There's a lot of time you have to be like, guys, stop now, watch me do. Yes, and you're already performing to the students a lot, because in a studio space, you are generally dancing with everyone and you're sharing the space, and you're, in the same space, watching each other move, and you move together. But when it's online, you have to take that break and show the students how it's done, and then they show you how it's done. So I feel, as a performer, it nothing really stopped for me when it shifted to online. It just became tougher, because now it was all on screen and every little mistake can be seen. So you have to be at the top of your game when you're performing online anyway. And I call my online classes restrictive spaces already, because of course the first thing that comes into action when you are now online and doing virtual classes and virtual performances, the space is the most important thing. Having said that, it also, I'm always excited about performing in site specific works. So already for me, dancing in this room of mine feels quite site specific, and and you explore with different camera setups, and you keep your laptop somewhere. It's quite exciting how you can really morph the space you're living in, because now the living space becomes a working space, which is sad, but also it's quite uh, exciting in a way when you no longer live in this place, but you just start creating in your space of living too. So it's like a lived space that you are playing with now creatively for me. So yeah, I think more than time, I would say space is a big factor that comes into action. Then
Yeah, I'd just like to add to what Ron was saying, and I sort of like actually really resonate with that, because this sense of when we're looking at this idea of performance, and we're looking at formal spaces that we go into, and developing that relationship as a performer within that space that we're getting within, whether it's proscenium or a large auditorium or a small space, an intimate gathering, but you're still stepping outside of what's comfortable for you, what's a space, what you would consider home, and going into a separate defined space as what becomes that relationship between you, the audience, the space, etc. that has obviously completely collapsed now. And suddenly your like home space is also your studio space, is also, you're engaging with somebody from across the screen while your doorbell is ringing, while, baby is probably rolling off the bed. So it's, I think it's really made me think of what are the implications of just doing that in the long run as well. What are the implications of just constantly being in front of a camera and in front of a screen in your home? And at least for me, like, I just wonder, like, if how much of stripping down would I have to do when I go back into a space with human bodies? Because at least for me, like, that sense of anxiety, and that's like that socialization has completely changed now. And now,
Yeah.
if I were to find myself with 20 other people, would that be comforting for me, or would that take me a few months of really having to go through this whole process of just dropping that baggage of what it's been like to be alone
Mm.
and
Mhm.
virtually connect?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
something that I've also really been sort of thinking about, because it's something that I'm certainly experiencing at the moment.
No, I hear you. In fact, I remember when I created a solo through the pandemic last year, and we were rehearsing online. And then one day we had the permissions to actually, so the curfew was lifted, there was no lockdown, we could move. So two, three of us would gather into a rehearsal space. And I remember the first day of rehearsal, and I couldn't, I was so afraid because suddenly the screen had gone in front of me. Like there was no screen and there were real people, like people who could come and touch me if they wanted to, and who could come and say that this is not working. And I was no longer safe with a screen in between. So that took some time. That took some time to get used to again. Brandy, I want to ask you how the situation in Canada is right now in terms of just going out and the condition with the virus and the pandemic. Because in India, what happened is we had started going back to us sort of a routine around November, December, when we got the permissions to go back into theaters and perform. Audience restrictions, but there was an audience that was allowed. And now again, we're back where we were. So how, what but I remember having a brief chat with you a couple of weeks ago where you said nothing is happening. So can you just take us through that a little bit? Like, how has it been for you and the other artists around you?
Yeah, like, I mean, I was deeply jealous of all my friends in India returning to their shows and actually just returning to public for some time. I mean, here it's been like there's the chaos of government everywhere, so there's all these hurdles. But yeah, like our spaces have essentially been closed because I do have a space to work from. It's closed to the public, but that's been a huge benefit. And it's like there's been periods where we can get into theaters, we can be a little bit open in certain ways, and then not. So for me, it also just necessitates, like, in coming back to thinking about space, whether we're thinking about like space as like just a resource that we need to move, whether it's a room or an outside or a studio, or if we're thinking about space as a material, like understanding like we're working with it a different amplitude, if it's a one-on-one performance, or if it's a proscenium performance, or if it's a site-specific performance. We know as artists, we have to change our amplitude of how we work in relation to that. Or even when we're thinking about a screen, like suddenly the screen is a space, like to switch from thinking of it as archival documentation that just records to actually really saying, this is something I'm constructing and thinking about, even if it is just this space. And then for us, like right now, we had a show that got canceled last year. And so it keeps getting pushed. And in thinking about it, I wasn't interested to make this show like an online streaming thing that just didn't serve the work. And I'm also quite interested in how we think through this moment. So we both do what we have to do, and also in what we're doing in a way to serve us, how that has some life after. So in thinking about this piece, it's a piece with a tap dancer. I thought, okay, if we don't want to make something that is just on a screen, because I also was like, as I'm sure we're all noticing, our attention for screens is different, is a little bit less, goes in and out. We have the distractions of, like, it's a different way of attending. So I thought, okay, how do we make something that could possibly bring bodies to screens? So since we don't have access to the theater, we just shifted to think like, how do you also acknowledge the absence of our performance spaces by their presence? So now the show has turned into an installation on the exterior architecture. So thinking about choreography through sound, through light, through a 4-channel video installation has been sort of like my way of thinking around those things in a way that can hold the intention of works that we're creating, and also can hold this moment, and also can offer something. Like, I miss the beauty of the public. I miss like random flirting with the barista. I miss beautiful flowers and like seeing all the colors of fruit. Even when we go out, we're so like, you can see bodies are traumatized, not just dancers. Like humans are traumatized in spaces. The body has become a site that no one trusts because it may have a virus or not. Like, all those things are there. So also, like, how do we make offers that remind us that being human is also deeply complex and complicated and beautiful in a moment that doesn't feel like that at all?
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because this, when we went into the second lockdown just a couple of weeks ago, I was telling someone like, the curfew was supposed to begin at 6 p.m. or something like that, and I was returning on my way back from the studio or somewhere, and the collective panic and the anxiety and the bodies that were just like, everybody just wanted to get home, but nobody knew what's going to happen, and it was not good, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone, as a collective, to actually go through this experience. To be sharing a lift with someone has become like, I'm in this enclosed space. Is it going to be safe? What if someone sneezes? What if someone coughs? Is that so? All of these thoughts are just sort of messing up with our bodies, and then the performative bodies go through some other experience altogether. Vaibhav sir, I want to ask you about the new work that you mentioned, also the shared choreographic process, which really, I have to admit, I am so in surprise and awe of, for coming from a senior classical dancer, because I think a lot of us my background has been, I trained in Kathak and then went on to explore contemporary. So I was rebelling quite a lot against a lot of the notions that have gotten attached with a certain classical form, the narrative that we connect to it. So you have been practicing it for all your life now, and you are constantly questioning the given within the structure. You are breaking down the hierarchies and the sort of given that comes with it. You are being open about things. You are challenging things. You are bringing in younger voices. So firstly, I want to appreciate and congratulate you for doing that, and thank you for doing that, because very few seniors who we look up to are sort of bringing in this perspective. So can you share a little bit of that practice and the new work that probably will evolve out of these troubled times, if I may say?
Yeah, I think that practice to me, or that, what should I say, that outlook This kind of an outlook also came because of my work in theater. Because I worked seriously with one of the prolific directors. I only did dance theater with him. But you as a classical dancer enter another world of theater. And then you, of course, looking at comparison. So the questioning came out of that. So whenever I'm doing even classical Bharatanatyam, traditional Margam, there's a question that I answer before I go on stage. I choose pieces which I know I have a reason to be there. I choose a piece which I know I have an answer to. And not just because it's a piece of classical history which I need to present for somebody else, because I am living it in this body. So I have to answer that first. And through the pandemic, as I was teaching these dances, I suddenly realized the pandemic is asking so many questions, and we are not answering that. So one of my students, Swarda, danced a piece on the abuse on women because they've been staying home now, closed homes. So domestic abuse was a thing that she danced. And I said, are we ever going to speak about this? Or are we just going to speak of Naikas or these beautiful heroines of the past who are always in love? They can be loved. They are valid in their own poetry. So I don't have any problems with Bhakti poetry or the medieval mysticism because I think that has kept me alive. But I also feel I need to live these questions out. So I started working with my own dancers. We thought we'd create pieces for online presentations. But seeing the exhaustion that has been happening, I said, this is pointless. So we called the show And She Spoke. And she spoke. And we're looking at women voices. Voices could be a woman of anything. It does not have to be problematic. It is not about a feminist stand that you have to take, I told my dancers. But as we started conceiving it, it struck me that if I take 8 of my dancers and work on a 20-minute piece with each of them, I'll be exhausted. And I'll be running dry of ideas. So suddenly I thought, why am I working only with my company? Since I'm talking of women voices, I should also talk about different bodies of classical dancers, because each body carries an idiom, a language which is different. The moment I take my own dancers from the company, they are aligned to each other in movement, in thought processes, in the way you move as a group. And this production, I thought, calls in for anybody whom I thought were young dancers. So I chose dancers, young dancers from across Pune, some of them from Pune, who don't fall into the idiom that I have learned or style that I've learned from Chennai, Madras, from Bangalore, and dancers whom I don't see on stage, but I think they're a little mad. And I like that madness should come in. And we don't have a forum for classical dancers. We work in isolation most of the time. And what I do, I believe is great. The moment you try to enter my work, I say, don't enter my work. So there's no collaboration happening. And if I don't allow this to happen with young dancers, I won't say I create a forum, but this dancer doesn't know somebody in Pune. And I think that would be great. But the only thing that I decided that I will not sit on a pedestal for choreographer this time. I will let them do what they want to. Be a director, of course, because we want to put the piece together. But for next 3-4 months, because we don't know when it's going to open, we will not meet. We're going to have online, and we're only going to work on process. And the process itself will be a performance. So that's very sure. Okay. There's not going to be a full-length idea of what happens to beginning of the performance, the climax of a performance, the middle of a performance, and what music comes in. No, we are not going to do that for sure. Right. The dancers are free to explore and do whatever they want to. I think they should be a little mad as classical dancers. The idiom binds you too much. They just need to push it, break it open. It's a mechanic. Yeah. It's a toy. They should open and see what happens and then put it together. Mm-hmm. So that is an idea at this stage. We've just started, but I'm sure 6 months down we'll have a work which is going to be interesting.
For sure, and I think I'll wait for that to happen and present itself. There's also a lot of you when you were speaking. There was another session. The other sessions that we've sort of been a part of now have questioned privilege, have questioned everything that's happening around us, inclusivity. I mean, Avantika, you've worked a lot, especially your whole process of Say What, reaching out to the audiences that usually is not, the part of the theater goers. So how is this whole situation affecting us? also making us more aware of our privilege more and more day on day, just to know that we have this access to the internet, the screen, the money, the time, the space to do that. But there are many more, and lakhs and crores who don't. So as teachers, as educators, as artists, how are we looking at inclusion and privilege? And how do you feel about that? Because like, honestly, when I just try to reflect, there is one, tremendous guilt, and second, just not knowing of anything. Like I just feel like uh, I want to imagine a space where everybody has access to the arts, but it's unreal. uh, so I want to hear your thoughts about this, just something that probably can hold this for us. So anyone?
Let me speak, of course, as being in this field for many years now. As a classical dancer, I don't think we have been able to, as dancers, come together yet. We not be able to raise a voice against, like we don't have a culture of funding of any kinds. We don't have government, the municipality, BMCs kinds, don't allow us to go into spaces where we could create a community activity. Like I would love to go to a BMC school and teach them free of charge. These young dancers would, I mean, students would want to learn or create and show them performances. But it's difficult to self-fund things. So can dancers come together is always something that is bothering me. And without expecting to be an institution where I will be funded, where we can work for art and where all voices can come together. It's not about only classical dancers, classical, contemporary, serious dancers, serious artists. Can we come together and create a voice? Because in India, especially, there's nothing. I mean, some sporadic funding that happens, but how do we enter? How do they realize? Like when you walk sometimes, and I was in Los Angeles, and I'm in San Francisco, and I was in a bus stop, and I read a home poem written on the bus stop. And here I have only Saas Bahu serials which come on my bus stops. Now, of course, I can't afford it. But if we raise a voice, probably of something, to get permission to dance outside or create a show outside is some mad thing. You can't get permissions dancing outside. I don't know how is it in Canada, but I mean, I'll be exhausted as a dancer to create a work outside. So I better go inside a space and dance and call audiences in. So, but if I think collectively, if we come together, we can start thinking.
Yeah.
That's one thing that has been in my mind, that we're just talking of dance, but we're not talking of culture, heritages, heritage sites where people come in, they can show dance. Tell them that dance is a part of life.
Yeah.
It's not just one entertainment that you have. It's to live is to dance.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. Avantika, Ron, anything? Brandy?
Avantika, you want to go?
No, go ahead. I'll go after you. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, just this idea. I mean, Canada holds a lot of. It has this interesting cultural space, like funding aside, but it's been a country that's been living with the whole world in awkward, messy, beautiful ways for a long time. So we've been having, which makes it an interesting place to practice, and for me, an interesting place to hold conversations like around what is contributing to the contemporary without a binary of classical or modern. And for the work we do, like to hold an interest that modernities have different timelines, and still often the idea of the modern is associated as a West-centric or a Eurocentric one, and that charting out a modernity or a contemporary conversation does have to have other narratives. And when we think a lot, because we have a system of public funding, for me as someone who receives that, I understand that that's a relationship to the public of which artists are also part of. I understand that my job, all of our jobs, is not just making our art and having those relationships, but on a fundamental level, we are contributing to the imaginative space of a culture, whatever culture we're active in. That's what artists are offering. And I can feel the public imagination a little bit dim in this period because we don't have all these interventions or ways of thinking, because we cannot gather. And then also to think like the conversations around privilege, absolutely, as soon as the veneer of something like a pandemic comes, like it's not like, oh, we can see the cracks in the system. It's like, oh, we can see the cracks are gaping holes. We all knew the cracks were there. So for us, it's like, or for Anandam, for the way I work, it is 100% about shared resources. Much of our work has been around like residency programs that's getting money to artists, maintaining, like we've been able to have 5 or 6 full-time artists during the pandemic employed. Like it just became a priority. Like not only should artists be paid, but in this time, we're in a place where we're going to lose artists, senior, mid-career, and junior, because it's extreme, right? It's extreme financial conditions. It's extreme producing conditions. And so these questions around privilege are also questions of when you have them, what are you doing with it? I think that's important as leaders in the field. And it's still also complicated to perform outside in Canada, but less so. Like not like we have a history of public space, but yeah, nothing like India. Nothing like India.
Avantika?
Yeah, I think I can just talk about as an independent individual practitioner where I'm at and what I'm doing at the moment, because I think at multiple points in my dance career, I've asked myself, what am I doing and is it enough? And who am I doing it for? And I think a lot of those questions have sort of informed also the choices that I've made as far as making work is concerned. And it's something that inclusivity and access is something that I reflect a lot on when I'm making work. Is this is this something just for people who can afford it? Having said that, unfortunately, as a teacher, I haven't been able to crack that because my classes are paid classes. They are for educated families who can afford to send their children, or working professionals who can afford to pay for these classes. How I'm dealing with that and how I'm dealing with this sort of existential question is that it's interesting because I've actually been really lucky that through the lockdown I've been a part of a program that Jacob Spiller is offering, which is called Curriculum in Motion. And even though the context is, of course, like based around American culture and, American systems, but they have really helped. I mean, just the program has really helped me think through how is it that I can work with just community structures in India, as disorganized as they may be. And what that's helped me do in the process is actually get together with an NGO that works with absolutely like low income households in like 3-tier villages, etc. And this particular NGO, is working with state governments. So, Vaibhav, how you were talking about where is the state involved in the arts? I think that's such a big battle. Personally, for me, I've been able to just kind of get through that thanks to just partnering with this NGO. I'm just teaching math and English and geography themes through movement. And these are, of course, like literally 2-minute videos that are sent via WhatsApp, because these phones are only WhatsApp enabled. It's a parent, and this is for very young children. So this is actually for pre-primary and primary, so 3 to about 7. This requires parent involvement. So it's, is it enough? No, it's never going to be. Am I happy that I'm being able to do something sitting at home for students at the moment who can't go to the Anganwadi schools, who can't go to, state funded schools? That's, I can literally just look at that and just be able to sort of participate in whatever way I can. And it's been something that I want to get more and more actively involved with. So if I make an online performance, are they going to watch it? No. It's going to be for people who can afford to pay. But what else can I do? I think I'm asking myself that question and trying and reaching out to people who need that support at the moment.
Wow, thank you. I mean, I'm just so happy that you shared this experience, because it's important to also know what kind of efforts are being put out there. No matter how small we feel they are actually pretty huge in itself. And baby steps at this point, I think baby steps for everyone. I think this is a good point to sort of go towards the end. We have a few people who joined us on Facebook and also on Zoom, so in case anybody has any questions, probably this is the time. If not, we're going to sort of go towards the end. And I think I keep remembering what Brandy said about, if you know you have the privilege, then what are you doing about it, is something that we have to probably go back to and just introspect. So if we don't have any other questions, I'm going to ask all of you to probably share a few parting thoughts, any last minute sharings, reflection, anything that you want to, from all of this that we've discussed today, heard. Ron, do you want to say something? You're on mute.
Yes, sorry. I'm still processing what I'm hearing. It's a lot of information and it's kind of triggering a lot of thoughts. So, yeah, it's interesting, this idea of privilege, because sometimes even if you have the privilege, you are not in the correct emotional state to even come and face people or be in a class and just dance, even if those who can afford to come to classes and can come and watch performances, I've seen them breaking down, and I've seen them going through a lot to even appear without video on screen, to come and sit and watch a piece of art or be a part of it, or even move their bodies, even if it's a fitness class. I've seen people go through like huge waves to overcome it. So privilege or no privilege, it's a time where I think everything is kind of in a roller coaster. And yeah, it's a tough time, but as artists, it's also our way to reach out to as many as possible in whichever ways, to kids, to underprivileged, to privileged, to all sorts of all sorts of places which allow us to voice ourselves, and listening to Vaibhav talk about classical and contemporary coming together in partnership in order to get more fundings, in order to work together as a shared collective. It's very interesting because I'm also a classical dancer. I've done Bharatanatyam for 20 years, and whenever I go for a project abroad, I'm asked to do Bharatanatyam. Even if I'm a contemporary dancer, they want me to show what is most Indian about me. They even when I'm trying to show the most contemporary part of me, they do ask me to perform what's Indian in me. So it also raises a lot of question about exoticism and a lot of what is classical dance, what is contemporary dance, what is classical contemporary, and what is contemporary classical, So I think India in itself, we keep updating ourselves on different things, and we have a classical background, we have a contemporary new introduction to this contemporary world, and some of us are into it. Like I've been now in contemporary dance for 12 years, in Bharatanatyam for 20 years, and for me to sit and balance this, it's a great place to be as a dancer, because I'm constantly like, what am I more, a classical dancer or a contemporary dancer? And what am I, when Vaibhav sir said that, what is your classical body, and what is the language that you're using to dance? And yeah, so lots of thoughts are triggered around it, and yeah, I'm just right now absorbing.
All right. Just give me a second. I think some people are sending in a few messages, and there was some issue with the chat box, but I think it's now open. So if any of you are trying to type anything, you can just put it right now. Probably just check the settings. If not, you can just raise your hand and I can just unmute and, you know, give you the permission to speak. So if anybody has any doubts or any questions, just raise your hand. We'll sort of bring you in. And yeah, thank you, Ron, for sharing that. And again, raises even more bigger questions and bigger concerns. And I think at this rate, we could just go on and on, because we're all really, and I feel that that's what happens, you know, when we sort of talk in forums like this, it takes a while. And when you fire all these thoughts and emotions and triggers, one thing leads to another, to another, to another. And I think, like Vaibhav mentioned, probably a forum or some sort of a collective that people can reach to time and again to support and help each other would really be great. But until then, smaller pockets exist, and probably whatever pocket you fit into is where you reach out to. So yeah, anybody, we're towards the end. Brandy, Avantika, Weber, would you like to just any parting thoughts while we wait if anyone has a question?
I just feel going away from the topic, of course, but at the end, whenever the pandemic is, or we over the pandemic or close to ending it, we need to know that what I feel is it's the frontline workers who are going to need help. And at this forum, I just want to say that there will be a time, because they have been really fighting this war. We have been sitting in our homes, you know. I have a number of doctor friends who are going to have issues. Right now, they are on this mode that they have to just work. So I'm also thinking of that. What is it as an artist will I be able to do for that kind of community? And any frontline workers, not only doctors. And it did not be about classical dance necessarily.
Yeah.
Something that we should all as artists probably, or as human beings, you know, who have been here, have been saved because of them.
Absolutely. And I mean, at this point, it's really about how can we help too, you know, how is it that
how we build up the confidence of everybody, you know?
Yeah. All right, there's a question from Trishala. As a young person in theater and exploring what more I like or what I want to do, how do I explore dancing, as it has always fascinated me? So Brandy, Weber, you can take it probably, the whole sphere of exploring dance and theater. Can you see the question? Yes. Would anyone want to respond?
Trishula, for me, I think, I don't know, you haven't said, have you been trained in dance or in movement? But if you have not, I think that is what is necessary if you want to explore dance. Because when I started working in theater, my theater director made me work for 2 years in theater. Though I didn't do a full spoken theater with him. He said, you need to understand theater before you might be a classical dancer, you know your idiom, but you don't know what this idiom. So he made us sit for rehearsals, do backstage work, sit there, watch rehearsals, watch shows, talk about it. So if you want to, for me, if you want to explore movement, you have to take it seriously. You could take up anything in movement classes, but, and I've seen lots of physical theater happening, not in India much, but abroad. And they're fantastic movement. The amount of movement that they do is fantastic. So I think you should look at movement. You should learn it, practice it. In case you're trained, I don't know what.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not trained, you should start there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, similar response. Like there's also just like this understanding that there is a great amount of magic that happens in the practice of art, but it's actually not magic. It's actually labor. Like that's actually all it is. And what's always reassuring for me is like on stage, you cannot lie. No matter someone's publicity, social media, friend group, like you just can't. You can see it. And so it's just it's also remembering like dance isn't a vague thing. Theater isn't a vague thing. The contemporary isn't a vague thing. It has specific lineages. Classical is not a vague thing. So I think just understanding that these are forms, these forms have conventions, these forms have context, these forms have history. You don't need to be a flag bearer for any of those things, but these are serious. And yes, to take all sorts of workshops is really good to find out what you're interested in and then to deeply follow that. Like there is a bit of a culture that's happened from the mid-90s within the contemporary field of like going to impulse dance for 6 weeks. And then suddenly everyone is a flying low expert from their 3-week workshop all around the world. Where I'm 20 years into a dance practice and still learning how to align my shoulder blade. So you need to find what you want to be rooted in. And then self-study is just, you can't get away from Riaz. No one can do that work for you. Yeah, to have it sit in the body. Yeah, I don't know. I wish there was more magic. I just find our work to be an incredible amount of labor.
On that note, I think this is a good point to sort of bring this to an end. And yes, lots of labor, lots of hard work, lots of bruised bodies, but lots of joy within and just healing and trying to find what we are searching for. And that's to each their own, I guess, as artists, as dancers, as practitioners. So I'm going to bring in Tanvi and I'm going to say goodbye to our friends on Facebook and probably on Zoom. And this is the end of our 2-day conference. How do we look back and ahead? A lot of hope, empathy, collectiveness, sharing, diversifying, inclusion. A few words that are just like in my head and that a lot of you have mentioned and spoken about. So thank you, Ranita. Thank you, Avantika. Thank you, Vaibhav. Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Tanvi, for helping me with this. And I think it's time to wrap it up. Tanvi.
Thank you, everyone, for this thought-provoking session. I think what has come out of like the common thread from all the 4 sessions has been empathy and intention, and I think that is my primary takeaway because sometimes it is too overwhelming and there's too many emotions that we are grappling with at the moment. So I think these two, like, I think figuring out how to pave the way ahead, at least for me, will be really helpful if I stick to at least these 2 terms for now. And the thought also has been, unfortunately, it has taken us like a pandemic for us to realize this, but it has never been easier to relate to another person wherever they, like, wherever, from whatever part of the world that they are coming from at this point. And I think all of us are experiencing very, very similar things in our minds and bodies. And I think rarely there comes like an experience that is so similar. So I think we all have like a lot to learn. We've also shared some very, very wonderful insights, and I thank you all for that. Thank you for making the time to do this, because this has been extremely insightful. So yes, and I hope we all find a physical space sometime to meet in person. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aditi and Tanvi. Thank you for organizing this.